Good morning, and thank you for joining us as we renew the pledge by sharing SCORE's 2021 State of the Education Report and our recommendations for the year ahead. Without question, this has truly been an extraordinary year. In 2020, our nation has navigated a deadly pandemic and public health crisis, and the crisis continues. We also saw a summer of protests that have increased awareness of the long-standing systemic, racial, economic, and justice inequities confronting communities all across our nation. These crises overlapped just as Tennessee educators and students were going back to school virtually or in person. As a physician and one who cares deeply about all of the families and all of the students of Tennessee, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of you and all of the educators who stood up virtual learning practically overnight, as well as so many community partners that work to fill in vital resource gaps for students. The efforts by educators and by schools were wide-ranging, they were nimble, and they were important. They rushed to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. We applaud their work and their true resilience in quickly pivoting to remote learning, ensuring that children felt supported and were fed, and in their determination to safely reopen schools and campuses this year. But as we now reflect on that frenzied time and the challenging months that are still ahead, we know the hard work may have only just begun for our educators and for our students. Let's remember, even before the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted learning for every student, we were deeply concerned that education was not fully meeting the needs of Tennessee's 1.2 million students in K-12 and higher education. It was not setting all students on their paths of success from kindergarten to career. Prior to the pandemic, academic gains had slowed. The uptick in college enrollment and completion had leveled off. And some of the long-standing agreements about the very foundation of student success had begun to fray. COVID-19 has worsened each of these problems and added significant new ones. It's likely that 2020 will be a lost learning year for thousands of students because of the pandemic. Early estimates suggest steep learning losses, particularly for young learners and students who were furthest behind before the pandemic. Economists estimate that K-12 students will lose up to 3% of their lifetime earnings as a result of the COVID pandemic. Longstanding education inequities for Black and Hispanic students and students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds have been exacerbated. Despite the tireless work of educators and faculty to stand up virtual learning systems and adopt safe reopening practices, much more will be needed. Now, more than ever, Tennessee students need policymakers, educators, advocates, community members to understand that we must have new answers to these new challenges. We need to all be in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, and headed in the same destination. That's what Tennesseans did a decade ago when the state faced up to its education crisis and was a big reason SCORE was originally formed. Tennesseans came together to write, to enact, and to implement a plan that built a strong foundation of K-12 and higher education reforms. High expectations and assessment, robust and transparent data to support decision-making at the state, district, and classroom levels, funding for higher education based on outcomes, and expanded college access through Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect. Once again, we at SCORE are ready to go to work, collaborating with partners and policymakers, educators, and parents to help Tennessee recover from COVID-19 and set a positive course for the future. That is what we do, and that is what we will continue to do.
For over a decade, SCORE has led the charge in securing dramatic improvements in education across Tennessee. SCORE prioritized key education strategies, and by 2013, Tennessee became the fastest improving state for student achievement. But this success highlights new perspectives about what it truly takes to prepare our students for their future. High-quality education is more than just an uptick in graduation rates. It empowers students to become economically independent adults. Despite 9 out of 10 Tennessee students graduating high school, only 4 out of 10 are actually prepared to begin college or a career. 1/3 of all students do not enroll in college at all, and those workforce entrants are on average only making $13,000 a year. And of the 2/3 who do go to college, only half actually graduate with a degree. That means graduating high school simply isn't enough for our students to succeed in college, career, and life. That means we must expand our mission to give Tennesseans the opportunities they deserve. But how? SCORE has adopted a cycle of action that takes new information and turns it into meaningful policy and practices. Through progress monitoring, SCORE identifies performance gaps, finds innovative solutions, and prioritizes a student-focused agenda. From there, SCORE leverages its learnings to inform and influence state policy, creating real, actionable change. And to ensure success, SCORE provides targeted support for policy implementation to scale proven solutions. As the cycle restarts, SCORE evaluates those policies by monitoring progress and identifying gaps, all in the pursuit of ongoing improvement across Tennessee. We have come so far in the last few years to reach such major milestones for Tennessee students, and we know we can take student success even farther in the future. We will not stop working for our children. We will look to the future and make certain Tennesseans are prepared for the world ahead.
Thank you, Senator Frist, for your leadership and for setting the stage for today's important discussion. And thank all of you for joining us this morning. When SCORE was founded in 2009, the education environment was different, but student needs were not so different. Students needed then and need now an education system that at every level, the classroom, the school, the district office, college administration, state agencies, and the state capitol, is singularly focused on the needs of students. And as we head into 2021, we believe it is imperative that Tennessee quickly prepares a clear, detailed, student-focused recovery plan for an education system badly battered by the pandemic. We know what the challenges are. Unprecedented learning loss across the education spectrum from reduced classroom time. Inadequate resources for the students who need the most help. Literacy instruction that leaves most students struggling to read on grade level. Inequitable opportunities that prevent disadvantaged students from learning at their highest levels. And inadequate support for students in their transition to and first semesters in college. But while the challenges are clear, we're not seeing solutions emerge that are as clear and coherent or widely embraced. Today, we're calling for a strong new plan to help us not only recover from COVID-19, but to serve as a springboard for the next 10 years of academic gains and expanded opportunities for all students. We need a clear vision with a sharp student focus. It must be centered on the idea that the primary role of education is to support every student at every level to gain the skills, knowledge, and credentials that will allow them to enjoy a fulfilling career and become economically independent adults. And it needs to make clear that all students must be served equitably. We need a detailed and measurable action plan that sets forth the state's agenda to achieve the vision. A vision is worth no more than the paper it's printed on without a strategy to achieve the goal. We must set specific goals and measure our progress against them each year. Then we need to double down together on implementing the plan. One of the big lessons of the past 10 years has been that passing groundbreaking policy can sometimes be easier than actually implementing that policy and delivering to students the improvements that we intended. Our limited resources cannot be wasted, and they must be directed first to the students who need the most support to learn at their highest levels. During this down economy, we must resist the temptation to cut education funding because the students are the ones who will pay for that short-sighted approach. Finally, we need to build widespread support for both the vision and plan. The best intentions will never be implemented unless key stakeholders buy into and agree to pitch in. When Tennesseans look back on 2021, it should be remembered as the moment our state embraced a student-focused vision of change. We must use the current crisis to dream big for every student. SCORE's 2021 State of Education Annual Report is intended to jumpstart this important conversation. And today, we'll share with you some of the challenges we continue to see, as well as 4 specific focus areas SCORE is recommending to help move us forward. First, some of the challenges. Tennessee's education system currently works for only 1 in 10 low-income students. At every step in the pathway from high school to college to career, economically disadvantaged students are progressing at slower rates than those who are not economically disadvantaged. Nearly 9 out of 10 economically disadvantaged students in Tennessee are at risk to end their education without a post-secondary degree or credential. The opportunity gap begins with early literacy. While Tennessee has climbed in national rankings in reading on the nation's report card in 4th grade overall and for Black students, the state still has a wide racial gap in student achievement. Tennessee's workforce is not representative of the students being served. Research has demonstrated the academic and non-academic benefits for all students, and particularly students of color, when learning with a teacher of color. Yet Tennessee has a long-standing mismatch between the percentages of teachers of color and students of color. High school graduates need more preparation for post-secondary and career success. The K-12 system graduates nearly 90% of our students. However, Tennessee's Ready Graduate Indicator and college success rates make it abundantly clear that too many students are not leaving high school prepared for college and career. Tennessee trails national post-secondary attainment rates. Even with our state's progress since the launch of the Drive to 55, Tennessee continues to trail the rest of the country in post-secondary attainment across all racial and ethnic groups. COVID-19 presents even greater challenges. Finally, as Senator Frist outlined, we know COVID-19 has made some of these challenges even tougher to tackle. It's likely that 2020 will be a lost learning year for thousands of students because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Long-standing education inequities for Black and Hispanic students and students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds have been exacerbated. For example, community college enrollment is down 19% this year among full-time, first-time students, with an even more alarming decline of 35% among Black male freshmen. And despite the tireless work of teachers, professors, district and campus leaders to stand up virtual learning systems and adopt safe reopening practices, students will need even more support in the months and years ahead if they're to stay on track for college and career. In short, we believe Tennessee's schools and institutions will need to look and operate differently after the pandemic. Within and beyond the state, there are examples of evidence-based advances, models, and practices with proven records, as well as outside-the-box thinking that redefines whole systems and that can result in better and more learning time, mastery-based student advancement, more informed remedial education placement, and stackable credentials. Tennessee has already proven we know how to take on an education challenge. In 2010, our state launched an education reform strategy built on some fundamental principles and policies. Principles like high expectations that put in place rigorous college and career academic standards, aligned assessment to measure progress toward meeting our standards, plus an accountability system that reflects real student learning. Excellent educators who receive regular actionable feedback that emphasizes educator impact on student growth and performance of all student groups. To deliver an excellent education for all, Tennessee should continue these 2010 reforms and abandon all business as usual practices that were not working for students before the pandemic. We believe coming out of COVID that now is the time to embrace a new and bolder long-term strategy and the targeted investments needed to address our new challenges. Here are 4 priorities for 2021 that SCORE is recommending to help guide and support the work. The first priority is to recover and reorient education systems in response to COVID-19. Tennessee should ensure the state emerges from the pandemic with a more resilient, equitable, and student-focused education system. First, we must articulate a vision for educational equity and create a COVID-19 recovery plan that advances the state toward that vision. This vision will frame the scale of the investments needed, as well as the innovations and supports that must be created for the students who likely lost the most in this pandemic. Students of color, students with disabilities, from economically disadvantaged families, from rural communities, English language learners. The Education Recovery and Innovation Commission, created by the legislature, will serve an important role in helping chart an innovative, student-centered strategy for our state going forward. However, it will be up to state leaders to embrace this vision and direct the resources and supports that address the serious educational inequities exacerbated by the pandemic. As of today, that clarity of vision and aligned resources, supports, and collaboration are not yet present. COVID recovery also will require re-engaging all students in 2021 through a statewide response that collects data for understanding the scope of the challenge and helps educators focus on teaching and learning. It will be necessary for the state to leverage every available resource and government agency to help coordinate health, education, and community efforts to block and tackle for schools and higher education institutions as they develop responsive interventions for their student population. Other necessary recovery efforts help educators learn from pandemic-motivated innovation and replace practices that failed students before and during the pandemic. Pilot, study, and scale up innovative teaching practices that leverage technology. Conduct the 2020-21 TCAP assessment so we have information about where students stand to inform policies and resource allocation decisions. And fiercely protect education funding and close the most pressing opportunity gaps. In order to appropriately respond to the learning crisis our schools, districts, and post-secondary institutions are facing, the state must provide financial stability. Research has demonstrated the significant negative impact that funding cuts in other states have had on outcomes in K-12 and post-secondary education. Leveraging all governmental funding sources, Tennessee should, at a minimum, keep overall education spending steady while making strategic investments to close the most urgent opportunity gaps. The second priority is to create equitable opportunities to college and career success. Ongoing and forthcoming changes in the economy will only accelerate the success of those with some form of post-secondary credential and leave behind those without any education beyond high school. Tennessee must support more students to earn post-secondary credentials. First, we can empower local communities and share statewide data to drive interventions that improve persistence and completion. Good data drive good decisions. Only the state is in a position to build the technological infrastructure that can deliver to local communities accessible, comparable, and disaggregated data about their students' current and projected pathways to college and career. When connected, these data points can help high school counselors, post-secondary advisors, faculty, workforce partners, and local policymakers develop a common understanding of what students need and then design nimble, local solutions for addressing those needs. Tennessee also should prioritize investing in students' seamless transition to post-secondary with summer bridge programs, non-tuition support, and dedicated advisors, and adopting K-12 and post-secondary policies and practices that create a smoother path to college completion. Post-secondary success is the responsibility of both K-12 districts and post-secondary institutions. A disjointed system invites student disconnection. Initiatives like Better Together here in Nashville, where the school district and the local community college jointly build a smoother pathway through higher education, should become the norm. While educators, faculty, and other adults may think of the pipeline in distinct silos, students shouldn't experience it that way. The third priority, treat early literacy like the crisis it is. It is past time to change the literacy policies and practices that help only 1 in 3 Tennessee third graders become proficient in reading and writing. Based on data from the nation's report card, an estimated 500,000 Tennessee students completed third grade in the last decade without a solid foundation in reading. Disruptions to schooling as a result of COVID-19 have likely added more cracks. Yet early literacy is essential to success throughout the rest of school, college, and career. During the 2020 legislative session, Governor Lee's administration and legislative leaders proposed far-reaching literacy legislation, reflecting the significant statewide momentum and support for a reset of Tennessee's literacy vision. The proposal would have codified a policy framework for K-12 and educator preparation programs and provided significant investments in professional learning for teachers and high-quality instructional materials and assessments. Despite widespread agreement about what needed to be done for students, 2020 is coming to an end without a statewide literacy initiative in place for students. Students need our action now. Let's make 2021 the year Tennessee enacts strong literacy legislation. In the coming year, the state also should help all districts and classrooms implement high-quality literacy instructional materials by investing in intensive professional learning in science-supported literacy instructional practices for teachers and leaders. Ensure Tennessee's early literacy policies and practices prioritize both explicit, systematic foundational skills instruction and knowledge building, and engage with and support educator preparation programs to prepare teacher candidates in the science of reading. The fourth priority for Tennessee: support and expand proven school models to advance opportunities for students of color and low-income students. Since the first Tennessee charter school opened in 2003, the state has advanced policies that increase access to high-quality schools for students, educators, and communities. Student assessment data show promising signs that public charter schools in some Tennessee communities are outperforming the traditional public schools within the same community. Because the overwhelming majority of charter schools are serving Black and Latino students and students coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, the state can advance a more equitable education system by creating the environment that supports the state's public charter schools to serve students and expanding the number of high-quality public charter schools. To do that, we should create a permanent solution for facilities funding for high-quality public charter schools. Tennessee stepped up to provide $5 billion in critical facilities funding in 2020, but these non-recurring grants did not provide a permanent solution. By committing state dollars to a recurring facilities fund, Tennessee can address long-term facilities needs and provide additional capacity to address opportunity gaps for students. Tennessee should also establish stronger charter authorizing accountability. The new Charter School Commission has adopted policies based on national best practices in academic, financial, and organizational issues, as well as policies to address deficiencies with the charter schools it oversees. With its authorizer role removed, the State Board of Education can bring a renewed focus to governing charter school authorizing practices across all charter authorizers. It also should identify and publicly report on the quality of charter school authorizers to maintain the vibrancy and effectiveness of the state's charter school environment. If district charter authorizing practices do not improve, Tennessee should consider the capacity of the Charter School Commission to become a direct charter authorizer to ensure high-quality charter schools can continue to serve Tennessee students. Finally, the state and philanthropic community should provide resources to incentivize and expand and replicate high-quality charter schools with a demonstrated track record. There are the four priorities that SCORE has identified for education in Tennessee next year. But it will take all of us working together to make progress. Our hope is when Tennesseans look back on 2021, it will be remembered as the moment our state truly embraced a student-focused vision of change and a specific plan of action to better serve all students in our great state. Now, to help unpack some of these priorities, we've assembled a terrific panel of education leaders from across the state to discuss what they're seeing and how we can work together to help move our state forward. And to convene this discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Sharon Roberts, SCORE's Chief K-12 Impact Officer, and Dr. Russ Wigginton, SCORE's Chief Post-Secondary Impact Officer.
Thank you, David, and good morning to all who are joining us. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and Sharon and I are very excited to have such a great group of leaders joining us for this important conversation. I first want to introduce all of our guests, and then we'll dive into deeper discussion about many of the topics David has just outlined for us. First, there's Dr. Brian Johnson. Dr. Johnson is superintendent of Hamilton County Schools in Chattanooga and was recently honored as Tennessee's Superintendent of the Year. He serves as the chief executive leader for the state's fifth largest district. The student academic growth is showing historic levels of improvement, with the district's overall composite in each subject area measured achieving a level 5, the highest level of academic growth on state tests. Next is Dr. Ellen McIntyre. Dr. McIntyre is Dean of the College of Education, Health, and Human Services at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which has earned a top rating for teacher preparation in Tennessee the past 2 years, and annually prepares approximately 200 teachers for licensure. Also joining us is Terrence Patterson. Terrence is a Memphis native who serves as Chief Executive Officer of the Memphis Education Fund, the city's most prominent education philanthropic fund. Terrence is also a dad with a son who attends public schools. He also was recently appointed by Governor Lee to serve as a member of the state's new Public Charter School Commission. Following Terrence is Janet Ayers. Janet is the president of the Ayers Foundation, which is dedicated to improving the quality of life for the people of Tennessee by positively affecting the fields of education, conservation, and social welfare. The Ayers Scholars Program is the flagship program of the foundation and is one of the state's most effective college access and success programs, serving 10 high schools and 2 community colleges in rural Tennessee. And last, and arguably the most important voice we will hear from today, is Tamari Ray, who will bring a student perspective to these issues. And she is now in her second year of using the Tennessee Promise to study marketing and communications at Pellissippi State Community College. Tamari is the first and only one of 7 in her family to go to college, and her plan is to transfer to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville to study public relations, and then she wants to open her own PR firm in the years ahead. We appreciate all of you being with us today, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sharon Roberts to pose the first question to Dr. Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Brian, we know that this has been such a challenging time. We'd love for you to spend a few minutes telling us about the approach you've taken in Hamilton County to ensure that all students are receiving a high quality instruction, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the question, Sharon, and I'm honored to be a part of this great panel, this important work. So make no mistake, this has absolutely been a challenging season as we are dealing with a global pandemic, but I'm very proud of the way that our teachers have responded. Our leaders have responded, our staff, obviously the direction of our school board, and our community as a whole, just as schools and communities across the state. We've tried to offer a mix of, and really offer choice, whether or not you want to come on campus. We've tried to make sure that the online offerings are robust and really try to support learners exactly where they are. I think a critical step our board made in the last budget cycle, and it was as the pandemic was starting, was to adopt and to purchase high quality instructional material. And so really I'm just humbled to work for a board that sees the value, in particular in the area of literacy, of making sure that we went forward with that purchase, because it's even more critical now that students are learning in different settings and in different places. And as we continue the work, we really tried to make sure that our teachers are trained and supported, and that we're continuing to move forward as a system. Technology has been just a significant change in the way in which it's leveraged. I've often said of the things that that we think about in the midst of this pandemic and the challenges that are there, the reality is there's a lot of learning and a lot of positives once we get to the other side of it. And one of them, without doubt, is technology. The way in which our teachers are using technology, the way our students are accessing the instructional resources via technology. I think that's an area that we'll have to continue to lean into and to support teachers with, really as we go forward. in the days ahead. And then, the really last thing that I would mention as I talk about our teachers and our leaders and our support staff is really our community. And so our community has played a huge role in us overcoming the challenges of this pandemic and really have responded, in a first-class way. And so, a couple of things that we're really proud of that our community has stood up is one, we found that students that were accessing the curriculum online and weren't coming on campus, sometimes that adult presence wasn't there. And so we had several philanthropic and faith-based organizations that stepped up and said, hey, we will offer virtual learning centers that house 10, 12, 15 students really intentionally. And then I think as Russ mentioned early on in our introduction, our probably signature initiative, so to speak, throughout this pandemic has been a decade-long commitment to every economically disadvantaged student in Hamilton County having access to broadband. And it will absolutely ultimately be transformational. And when we talk about equity and excellence, it is definitely a linchpin. It will be critical and will prove beneficial for the days and years ahead.
Ron, that's incredibly impactful, the community work that's going on in you and your team and your teachers and your families. I know we're all worried about this next issue. So can you give us any insight into the level of learning loss that students may be experiencing, what we can do now to address that, and what we need to be thinking about in the months to come?
Yeah, so that's obviously an area that I think everybody is concerned about as students. When we started this conversation in March, I don't know that anybody thought we'd be here talking about it in December, and looks like we'll be talking about it on into March. But we're here, and so how we respond is going to be critical. And so for us, intervention has been really important. We started this summer really taking our data and using benchmarks, using former TN-rated performance and trying to group our students, and took our most at-risk learners and actually brought them on campus in very small cohorts across buildings, used our CARES funding to try to provide really intentional supports for students that we felt like were maybe the most in need. 20 intensive lessons and sessions is really what we focused on. And then the other thing that we've started here in the last couple of months in our Midtown learning community, our community superintendent there did a great job with their school leaders and teachers. They started an initiative called My Minutes Matter. And that initiative simply is trying to recapture, there's a little over 4,000 students in that learning community. They did the math on the minutes and have set bold targets and trying to recapture those minutes. They took the learning through our learning management system. Students can access it via phone. And they've made it a game. They've made it very competitive where students are really trying to go back after those minutes. But those are the kind of things from an intervention standpoint that I think we're going to have to be continue to be really intentional about really going forward. The other thing as I talk about intentionality, I think we've got to be really intentional. And for us, we're really working to be intentional with, again, as I mentioned, the implementation of high quality instructional material, but then also benchmarking and responding with a real focused and measured way to make sure that we're supporting students, supporting teachers and leaders and schools to really move their work forward. And then, that support also spills over to the family, into the household. And so, something I hope that comes out of this as we think about TN Ready, even as we think at the system level about our assessment system, that we make sure that the results that we share are clear, concise, and that there is a clear path for response to that information. I think as I think back historically in my time in the state, a lot of times I think we can take for granted the real value of having that data and what that data can do and how we can leverage that from the family construct. And so we're really having a lot of conversation about really how do we make sure that the parent understands exactly where the student is, but not just where the student is, what they can do as a family to help bridge and to close that gap as we go forward. And then, really, again, the last thing I would mention in regards to this area is I think this is a moment of innovation. This is an opportunity for us as a district. We're using it as such, and I think and hope it'll be used across our state as such, as a moment to really reflect on what's worked what's not worked. Let's put the things that haven't worked to the side. What are the essential areas? And also to really take the constraints off and think about the new ways in which we might do school, the new ways in which we might think about programming and calendars and structure to support the needs of students and to support the needs of our community at large.
I'd like to turn to Janet and ask her about the Train Network as a key organizer, funder, and leader for this new network that's linking 15 rural school districts. Could you talk about the support for local school leaders and students to help them to succeed during this COVID time and beyond? And share with us what this is all about and why you think it's so important.
Thank you, Russ. Dr. Johnson, just like you, we as school districts realized we had to do some major pivoting. And what this global pandemic has done is it's really revealed to us, we service rural communities, is there is a glaring disparity in these rural districts of just resources and access to resources and how we were going to be able to support those. So we partnered with the National Institute on Excellence in Teaching, the AIRS Institute on Teacher Innovation and Learning, SCORE, and our own foundation to really pull together a group of 15 different rural school districts that had the leadership that understood that they wanted to make a difference. This was a time not only to learn, but once we carried ourselves through this pandemic, what did it look like on the other side? And most of these school districts are either at risk or distressed. So there is a huge disproportionate of lack of resources. And what we realized when we formed Train and we pulled this group together was we had to start with the fundamentals. Dr. Johnson, we just heard about the broadband and access. There is a large share of our rural communities. It's not just that lack of access of the equipment or the technology or the affordability piece. It's the pure lack of cell and broadband coverage to all areas of these rural communities. So we started there as a group with these 15 districts, pieced together to make sure that every student had access, whether that meant somebody driving a packet out to a student and collecting that packet because there was no broadband, even a hotspot capacity for these students. Once we hit those low-lying levels, it's weekly conversations with this network that they're doing a deeper dive into the robust academic preparation, working district by district. So not only is it the network, each rural district is assigned someone either from the AIRS Institute or from NIET to actually go to the district to do embedded training, to work with them, to coach them, to do modeling, to see how they're interfacing with their students with virtual, what those packets look like, if they're having to take those packets to school. But quickly realize that this network will have a life beyond the pandemic. It shows the glaring areas we knew that we had issues, but it put a spotlight on it. And I feel like what these districts are receiving out of this rural network, out of Train, is that peer-to-peer, that outside modeling, a resource that rural communities really had never reached out to do. There's really not been a rural network to pull this group together. And we forget how limited those resources are, not only for the students and just the basics like broadband, but just the resources. The people in those central offices that service these communities are wearing most of the time multiple hats, that they don't just serve one capacity of what happens in that district. They're carrying 4 or 5. And so they really have learned from each other in a way that before they might have been a little proud and didn't want to share areas where they may have been struggling. Now District A is helping B and vice versa. And so there will be a life beyond or Train beyond the pandemic. And we knew going into this that we had some issues. Really realized with Train that I hate that it took a pandemic to make us realize that we needed to do this, but I'm quite thankful that we pivoted with great partners in SCORE and NIET and the AIRS Institute. We were just a convener and a funder, and the Real Talent Pipeline is doing some great work on the ground helping these rural districts. And to a district, we're seeing significant already the fact that not one student is being left behind, because through this network, they're learning ways that student by student by student, they're being reached, which was critical because we're losing a lot of students in this process of not being able to reach them and find them. And we've been able to find our students as well.
Thank you, Janet. And I can say firsthand that I had a communication with one of the leaders in one of those districts this week, and he made the comment that there was no way anyone could know the impact that this work has had in their district. So thank you for your leadership there. I'd like to shift to Terrence. And Terrence, like Dr. Johnson and Janet and SCORE, we know that the Memphis Education Fund has been thinking ahead and thinking about best how to address COVID-19 response and recovery and the inevitable learning loss that Shelby County students and all Tennessee students are facing as we begin to think about emerging from this pandemic. Can you share with us some of the specific ideas that you all have surfaced?
Thank you for the question. I think when we look at an environment like Memphis, where we have a lot of low-income students, families living at or below the poverty line, I think we wanted to initially focus on those non-educational needs to ensure that students and families could have the energy to focus on sitting in front of a computer and adapting to a virtual environment. So at the Memphis Education Fund in March, and then through this spring, summer, and then even into the fall, we partnered with community organizations to make sure we could identify families that would benefit from micro grants, whether that be $250, $500, or $750, depending on the number of students that they had in Shelby County or Achievement School District schools, to supplement income for either rent, for utilities, for PPE, and also for supplies for students. Again, just to make sure that there could be a laser focus on attendance so that we could do our best to support families in this need. But I think in addition to that, we also have resurfaced a lot of our thinking around reimagining the school calendar and the school year, and also the delivery of education going forward into the 21st and even 22nd centuries, right? Like, we have got to think about how we could have better absorbed this pandemic if we were already teaching on a year-round calendar, if we already had universal use of technology and portable devices for students. So it's really inspiring to hear the work that's happening in Chattanooga and across the country around technology. And I think for us, we believe we should use this moment to really push our thinking around no longer having those long summers off to avoid some of the learning loss, and also thinking what the school day looks like and how we can also support parents and teachers to ensure that they have the resources that they need to be able to teach in this evolving environment. Again, all for the purpose of serving our students that really and truly can thrive as long as we give them the support that they need.
Thank you, Terrence. And I'm going to turn back to Janet. Janet, we know you share one of SCORE's 4 recommended priorities in doing all we can to increase both college access and success, and how vital that is to the future of our state's economy and the future lives of hundreds of thousands of Tennessee students. And you are actually doing that work. Share with us a little more information about the tremendous success you all have experienced with the AIRS Foundation Scholars Program and lessons learned in helping more students persist and complete college and be ready to enter the workforce.
Thank you, Russ. Unlike Train was probably an offshoot because we're so closely connected to our students. And so this is a pilot and new, and it's already working. The AIR Scholars Program we've been doing for 21 years. So we have a long history and a long lead line of working with student by student. The way our program works is that we hire and embed into the school system trained college and career coaches. They are independent of the school system. They are accountable to the AIRS Foundation. They're staff of the AIRS Foundation. But we have a memorandum of understanding with the school system so that we provided an office space, have direct access to the students. And really what these college and career coaches are they're their college or career advisor, they're their coach, they're their mentor, they're their emotional supporter. They're there to be barrier removers, to do wraparound services with the goal of working with these students from the 8th grade until they complete whatever it is they do post-secondary. So those counselors have a long time with these students, and they long even after they get that college credential or degree, they're still reaching out to these counselors. What we have learned through the years, perfect example, Riverside High School in Decatur County, Tennessee, when we started this program, less than 30% of our students of our entire graduating class was continuing their education past high school. Today, even in pandemic year, almost 90%, 87% of our school students, and that's not a picked number, that's out of the graduating class, are continuing their education past high school. Of those that continue, even more importantly, 82% are actually receiving that degree and that credential. A vast majority of these students are first generation, very low income students that we're working with. And it literally is student by student with those college and career counselors. We know that without those credentials, without that degree or that certificate, our students over a lifetime will make $1 million less without that. So all means all to us. Every student, our counselors meet them where they are. If they are food insecure, they're provided food. If they need help getting into the dorm and moving their things, they're moved. If they have transportation issues, that's provided. Any barrier that presents itself, while I don't expect my counselors to be everything to everybody, we do provide the counselors with the toolbox that whatever resource that they may need, they are well connected to those resources throughout the community and beyond, so that our students are receiving the support services they need so they can be successful. What we didn't realize in the pandemic years, what this would do would be that because of that direct relationship by student, we were able to take that, make sure our students weren't lost, import that into the train system so that each student is receiving those services. But it is that trained, educated, one-on-one, meeting the student where they are, making sure that the post-secondary experience is a good fit, that our students are having choices. They are in almost 100 different post-secondary institutions across the country. We help our students get into a Tennessee College of Applied Technology, to Yale, to Harvard. We have them everywhere in between. We want them to have a choice. We do not want those choices taken from them. And really believe the success of our program has been that one student at a time, meeting them where they are, and that completion factor. You know, we can get a lot of students started, but we see them all the way through to completion. We're currently working with about 10,000 students, and like I said, 87% of them this year are continuing their education. That benchmark of that 2 weeks after they're enrolled in post-secondary, if they're still there, 82% of those are still being retained or in that post-secondary setting. And you know, there's more for us to tackle and to see. So we want to recruit these students back home. But that being said, we're educating a lot of rural Tennessee students.
Thank you for that really powerful story. And what I especially like about it is how you're able to tie it with data and that combination, and and the conviction in which you speak about it is inspiring to all of us. And it really leads in nicely to, you were talking about students, Janet, and we have a student with us, Tamari Ray. Tamari, all the things we're talking about are only as effective as how students receive them and are able to capitalize on them. So would you take a moment and share with us a little about your story and your particular experience with Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Achieves?
So when I graduated high school, I always knew that I was going to go to college because of just me being the oldest in my household. I just wanted to be a good role model for my siblings, and I wanted to achieve my career goals. So ultimately, I did want to go to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, but the tuition was just too expensive for me and my family to afford. And there was only so many scholarships that I could be able to receive. So me getting the Tennessee Promise Scholarship and having my Tennessee Achieves mentor to support me and guide me throughout my college career has been a game changer. They make my completion coach, which is Sumner, she makes sure that I'm always on track, motivated. She checks on me all the time. We could text just like normal friends, you know? So it's nice having someone there as like a friend and like a mentor to guide me throughout college. And I would encourage all high schoolers, even if they aren't going to a community college or even if they're not going to use the scholarship, I would encourage them to even consider it just as like a backup plan, because you never know, life happens, you know. You could get accepted into like Harvard, and what if you can't move in, or what if you can't afford that anymore? So, you know, you might have Tennessee Promise as a backup. And just for me, it's been just a real blessing. And I know that is for a lot of other students who are in places like me, you know. So that's kind of how my experience with the scholarship and with Tennessee Achieves has been so far.
Thank you for that. And it's a really nice combination of the kinds of experiences that Janet was talking about, mirrors your experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to follow up and ask you another question, Tamari. We all know that the enrollment at community colleges has declined almost 20% this year among first-time, full-time students. And for those who did enroll, the remote classes have been challenging for many students.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little about your experience in these last couple semesters, and what do you see as some of the toughest challenges students are facing, especially during this pandemic time?
Well, around spring 2020, like around fall break, March is when everything had kind of went to shambles. So we had to go from just, you know, normally meeting in person to transitioning to fully online. And that was really tough for me, just personally considering what classes I was taking. I was taking an accounting class, and I was already just having a hard time in that class, just going every day and just trying my hardest to do the work. So it made it even 10 times more difficult for me to try and retain the information and basically like teach myself accounting online. So it was very difficult. And I know that it was probably like that for a lot of other students too. It was just hard. Everyone that I've ever talked to that's, you know, been going through the same thing as me, they've all said like, oh, man, I feel like I have to teach myself how to, you know, do biology, or I have to teach myself statistics, you know, stuff like that. And it is hard. So that's kind of how it was when we first transitioned. But after taking online classes in the summer and fall, I took summer and fall classes this semester. I've gotten more used to being online. I got more accustomed to it. And with having to work and juggle online classes at first, like how it was when we first transitioned, it was very difficult. And a lot of students were in different, you know, positions. Like for me, for instance, I work at a restaurant. So as soon as, you know, we had went on lockdown, restaurants weren't labeled as essential businesses. So we had closed down. I was unemployed, looking for a job, looking to, you know, pay my bills and also trying to keep my grades up and trying to work towards my college degree. And for some other people, they were essential workers, labeled as essential, and they probably had to work more hours than they've ever had to work before in their life because of COVID. And, it must have been harder for them to try to manage, grades and trying to make sure you're on time at work and making sure you're getting all your hours and stuff like that. So that was like the biggest barrier between me and trying to maintain my college degree. But, I did get a lot of support from, like I said, my Tennessee Cheese mentor. She was always there texting me. My professors, my classmates, we all were kind of working together to try to teach ourselves how to work with online. And, I would have professors on different formats like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, stuff like that. They were just getting a feel of it. And now, professors are getting used to it now because this is all we have. So it's been getting a lot better with that. And I've been having friends and family, of course, they're supporting me, cheering me on, me and my little cheerleaders, because, they're proud of me, and I know they are. And that's what really just keeps me motivated, is the fact that I could, have people around me tell me that you're doing a good job. Like, I'm proud of you. That's what a lot of students need to hear, like, it's really, really tough, but I'm just grateful for all the support that's kept me motivated and determined to finish my, college degree out and get my job and get my life to where I want it to be. So that's how I feel about that.
Thank you, Tamari. I'm going to shift to Dean McIntyre, Ellen, and I know you've enjoyed hearing Tamari speak to us. It's your life's work, working with students like Tamari. I want to shift to the report section on early literacy in our report. And there's a disappointing statistic in that section that only about 1/3 of Tennessee students are strong readers and writers when they leave the 3rd grade. I know that it's been your life's work in this space. What are some of the key things that need to be in place in the early grades so that all students have a strong literacy foundation?
Sure, and thank you, Sharon. Thank you for having me, and thanks to this incredible panel. All of your stories have really inspired me today, especially you, Tamari. First of all, there does need to be a very strong alignment between what happens in teacher preparation programs and what happens in the K-12 schools. And in particular, in the K-3 space, there needs to be very strong alignment between how teachers are prepared to teach reading and what the teachers in K-3 classrooms are doing with respect to teaching of reading. And it needs to be the teaching around the science of reading. When districts adopt high quality materials, like in Superintendent Johnson's district, then those high quality materials are based on the science of reading. The teaching is going to be a whole lot easier and obviously more effective as well. The science of reading, if high quality materials are designed around the science of reading, it means that in the K-3 classrooms, there's a strong focus on the foundational skills, and they're taught in a direct, systematic, explicit way. And these materials also help young readers build a lot of background knowledge, which is so essential for comprehension. And really, it's our responsibility in teacher preparation programs to help make the connection between how we teach our new teachers how kids learn to read and how instruction happens, and those materials are sort of the link between the two. And so it's really important for us to be addressing those materials as well. Now, we know that the work is much harder right now, right? We've all known about the summer learning loss. Terrence brought it up already in this panel. And with COVID, we're learning from the most recent report out of the Economic Policy Institute that students returned to school this fall having lost an average of 7 months of learning, and up to 10 months for our most vulnerable students. That's a lot of learning to make up. And there's really only one way, and everybody's on this screen sort of referenced it in some way. There's only one way to really make up for that kind of learning loss, and it's with intensive one-on-one or small group tutoring. And there's a lot of research evidence that show the high impact of high quality tutoring, but it has to be done in certain ways. It has to be intensive, it can't be once a month, and it has to be high quality materials, and it has to be based on the science of reading. And we do have some good news about that. Probably most of you know that Governor and Mrs. Haslam have a tutoring project that they started. It needs to be expanded and ramped up. Not enough kids needs are being met. There's also some good news coming out of the federal government. I'm involved with this organization called Deans for Impact, and their whole mission is to transform teacher education nationally. But they're also a policy institute. And so they've been working with some senators on creating a bill to organize teacher preparation around tutoring, or to organize tutoring within teacher preparation, so that all the new teachers coming out have a direct impact on student learning right now. I mean, in January, immediately, so that we have teacher candidates in schools all over in every state who are directly teaching kids in with intensive support. It's a great idea for two reasons. First of all, we need the immediate help right now, and we have millions of young people right now in teacher education programs who could be making a direct impact in schools right now. But the other thing that it does is it's helping to prepare scores of new teachers on how to best teach reading. So if the requirement is you have to have a science-based tutoring program, if this bill passes, it could really make a huge impact, I think, on the field. I know this works because when I was at Charlotte, I started a summer reading camp. The kids got camp all day, but 2 hours of camp was an intensive tutoring, one-to-one or small group tutoring on literacy. And we worked with teachers who were already practicing teachers, already trained teachers, and we retrained them on an evidence-based or based on the science of reading tutoring model. And after that training, the teachers all said to us, you know, I now feel like I really understand how to teach reading. So it took that kind of work in order for them to understand it. And that sort of reminds me of what the report out of SCORE is suggesting, that we replace practices that failed students before the pandemic with some practices that we know could be sustainable forever. And I think a tutoring model that comes out of teacher preparation really could be one of them.
Great. Thank you, Ellen. Really appreciate your passion, and we certainly agree with the connection between K-12 and educator prep programs and the impact that can have on student literacy. Would love to take the several of the points you just said, take those just a little bit further and ask you, what is it that EPPs might need? What kind of supports might they need? Be able to be better poised to ensure that teachers, when they leave your programming, not just yours, but any EPP, are prepared on day one to teach children how to read.
It's so important. Thank you for asking that question. I am happy to say that there are efforts across the nation that are working on the improvement of teacher preparation, but there's still a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do. So I'm so glad that SCORE is really interested in how we prepare teachers, because we have to get better at it. It is our responsibility. I will say that I did mention that in order to really prepare teachers really well, we have to work directly with our school partners. We can't just do it in a silo and expect our candidates to go out in Superintendent Johnson's school district and then just pick up those materials. If teachers can't make the connection between what they learned in their prep programs and what they're doing in their classrooms, we're going to have a real problem. So we have to prepare them together, and in really true partnership ways, not just take our interns, but really help us think about what it is you in the school district want our candidates to learn. Also, I will speak directly to teacher educators. I do think that there are many teacher educators who do need to get retrained, get more up to speed about the field of early literacy. I know I had to do it. When I was trained as a teacher educator, I was during the whole language movement in the late 80s and early 90s. A lot of value in a lot of that work. But we weren't really reading the psychologists who were really studying reading and what works in terms of pedagogy, in terms of helping children learn to read. And it wasn't until some really important documents came out about the science of reading did many of us in the field start to have to relearn and retrain ourselves. And I'm happy to say that today that's easier to do. With the wonderful documents that say SCORE has put out on early literacy that has summarized the science. Deans for Impact has put out a wonderful report that has summarized the science but is written for practitioners. The International Literacy Association has redesigned their principles to help people do this work. It's not that hard to do anymore, but it's imperative that teacher educators understand the science in order to prepare the next generation of teachers, and ideally to do it with the partners that we have in our schools. So that's probably key, the most important thing.
Thank you for that, Ellen, and like for us to close with Terrence speaking to the need for us to launch and support innovative approaches and school models to serve those students who may need our help the most. Terrence, you are a member of the new Tennessee Public Charter Schools Commission, as well as a board member of the Tennessee Charter School Center. And we know Memphis Education Fund is invested heavily in ensuring the success of public charter schools in Shelby County. What do we need to do to continue to develop and deploy high-performing charter schools as another avenue to serve families and students?
Yeah, I think first, the new commission has got to work really hard to be a best-in-class authorizer. And we've been working really closely with NACSA, other similar organizations across the country to learn from failures and then also improve on successes. So I think just improving the quality of authorizing, not just at the state commission level, but also across the state. It will help to support our high quality charter schools. I think second to that, especially in neighborhoods and communities where you have pockets of underperformance, making sure that we are replicating higher quality schools in those neighborhoods and in those communities, and making it easier for high quality schools to replicate. And then also, as I think about how we can support the sector and improve charter schools and just more innovative schools more broadly, it's really breaking down barriers around facility access. We see on numerous occasions where schools are allocating 10 to 15% of their per pupil to a facility where those are resources that could be allocated directly to academic support or teaching support. And so how can we as a state continue to push for a comprehensive facilities fund, something that's in the reoccurring budget, to make sure that schools at the local level and at the state level can sort of eliminate that barrier so they can focus more exclusively on the teaching and learning. But I think we're on the right track. I think as a state, we are working hard to continue to improve the quality of our charter sector. I think there was a moment over the last 10 or 15 years where we were increasing the number of schools, and now the focus has got to be on making sure the schools that we have are of higher quality and serving children and meeting a variety of different student needs based on the communities, but also based on those needs of those students and those families.
We really thank you for joining us today and sharing your experiences to help us unpack these priority topics. And we really appreciate everything you're doing. With that, I'll turn things back to David.
Thank you, Sharon and Russ. And thank you to this entire panel who are doing the hard work each day to move our state forward on these important topics. It's now my honor and pleasure to welcome another outstanding leader to share some thoughts. Please join me in welcoming the Speaker of the Tennessee House of Representatives, Cameron Sexton.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you today and for your dedication and support of Tennessee students. This discussion would not even be possible without your hard work and your advocacy on behalf of our state's next generation of leaders. Thanks to Senator Frist, David Mansouri, and the entire SCORE board and team for their continued leadership in helping ensure that every Tennessee student has an opportunity for a quality education. Over the past 10 years, we've come a long way in raising our expectations and setting high performance levels, both in K through 12 classrooms as well as at our colleges and universities. But there's clearly much more we need to do. SCORE's Renewing the Pledge report outlines our many challenges as well as the tremendous opportunities ahead of us. It's going to take all of us working together to fulfill this pledge. Regardless of where you live, what background you come from, every Tennessee child should have the same opportunity to achieve their academic goals and dreams in the classroom. One of our biggest issues is guiding students along a successful pathway to a lifetime of learning by making sure they are reading on grade level by the end of the 3rd grade. This focus on early literacy, increasing reading proficiency scores, remain our top priority as we prepare to enter this new legislative year. I can assure all of you that Governor Lee, House leadership, and our entire General Assembly will be working to address these important issues in the weeks and months ahead. We know the COVID pandemic has created enormous challenges within our schools and our classrooms, in our colleges and universities. We'll continue to ensure the state's educators have the resources and support they need to help students get through this pandemic safely and on track academically. All of this work and your leadership are incredibly important to Tennessee's future and our success. When students graduate from high school, they must be prepared to succeed in college, military, or in the workforce. The future of hundreds of thousands of students, as well as local and state economies, are at stake. Together we can and will ensure their success. Thank you again for all you do, and may God continue to bless this great state.
Thank you, Speaker Sexton, and the entire General Assembly for your leadership on these important issues. We know your work with Governor Lee and his administration and with educators and leaders all across the state will help us set a clear path and plan of action going forward to fulfill the pledge for Tennessee families and students. I also want to thank each of you for joining us today, as well as the many presenters and panelists who have helped share this annual report. And most importantly, I want to thank you for the work you do every day to support Tennessee's students. Thank you again, and we stand adjourned.